In the summer of 1914, Europe was the center of the world. It was an age of progress, grand balls, and empires that seemed like they would last forever. Nobody knew they were standing on a trapdoor. Under the surface, a web of secret treaties and a frantic arms race had turned the continent into a powder keg. All it needed was a spark. And that spark didn't come from a battlefield. It came from a wrong turn in a city called Sarajevo. One assassin, one stalled car, and 2 gunshots. In a matter of weeks, the world's most powerful nations would be dragged into a conflict they couldn't stop, for reasons many of their own soldiers didn't even understand. They said it would be over by Christmas. They were wrong. This is the story of how the world we knew ended, and the modern world was born in blood. This is part 1, The Descent. Today, we're going back to the summer that changed everything. Let's revisit history. By 1914, Europe wasn't just ready for war. It was dressed for it. This was an arms race on a scale never seen before. Germany and Britain were locked in a naval rivalry, obsessed with the dreadnought, the battleship that made all others obsolete. In this era, military leaders held more power than diplomats. War wasn't seen as a disaster. It was seen as a glorious necessity. This is where the math gets dangerous. Europe was a web of if-then statements. Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy formed the Triple Alliance. In response, France, Russia, and Britain formed the Triple Entente. These weren't just friendships. They were suicide pacts. If any one country got into a fight, everyone was legally obligated to jump in. It meant a local border dispute in the Balkans could, and would, trigger a global catastrophe. Why was the whole world involved? Because Europe owned most of it. Empires were the ultimate status symbol. Britain had the sun that never sets, while Germany's Kaiser Wilhelm II was desperate for his place in the sun. They weren't just fighting over European dirt. They were clashing over resources in Africa and markets in Asia. Every colony was a new friction point where a spark could start. Finally, there's the raw emotion, nationalism. This wasn't just patriotism. It was an explosive desire for self-determination. In the Austro-Hungarian Empire, dozens of ethnic groups, Serbs, Czechs, Slovaks, wanted out. They didn't want to be subjects of a distant emperor. They wanted their own flags. The Balkans became the powder keg because Serbian nationalism was directly threatening the survival of the Austrian Empire. Our ingredients? Guns, treaties, colonies, and pride. The keg was full, the fuse was laid, and in June 1914, a 19-year-old with a pistol was about to light it. June 28, 1914. Sarajevo. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, is visiting a restless province. Waiting in the streets are 6 assassins from the Black Hand, a Serbian nationalist group. The first attempt? A grenade that misses the car. The Archduke survives, but instead of fleeing, he decides to visit the hospital. This is where history pivots on a dime. The driver takes a wrong turn and stalls the engine directly in front of a deli. Standing there, stunned by his luck, is 19-year-old Gavrilo Princip. He steps forward and fires 2 shots. The Archduke and his wife, Sophie, are killed. In that moment, the old world died with them. Princip didn't just kill a man, he murdered the 19th century. Austria-Hungary is furious. They want to crush Serbia, but they fear Serbia's big brother, Russia. So, they turn to Germany. Kaiser Wilhelm II gives them what historians call the blank check. Total unconditional support for whatever they do next. It was the most expensive promise in history. Armed with German backing, Austria issues an ultimatum to Serbia designed to be rejected. Serbia agrees to almost everything, but almost isn't enough. On July 28th, Austria declares war. Now, the alliance tripwires begin to snap. Russia mobilizes to help Serbia. Germany, seeing Russia move, declares war on Russia and its ally, France. The diplomats are screaming into telephones and sending frantic telegrams, but the military timetables have taken over. The machine can't be stopped. Germany's plan to win a 2-front war requires them to knock France out fast. To do it, they have to go through a neutral country, Belgium. And that is the one thing Great Britain cannot ignore. Germany's entire strategy rested on one man's map, Alfred von Schlieffen. The goal? A lightning-fast knockout blow against France by swinging through neutral Belgium. They had to win in the West in 6 weeks before the Russian steamroller could mobilize in the East. It was a massive gamble, but they didn't count on the Belgian resistance or the British scrap of paper treaty. Germany ignored Belgium's neutrality, calling the 1839 treaty a scrap of paper. Britain disagreed. On August 4, 1914, the British Empire declared war. Suddenly, it wasn't just a European scrap, it was a global one. From India to Canada to Australia, the resources of a quarter of the planet were now pointed at Berlin. By September, the Germans were so close to Paris they could see the Eiffel Tower. The French government fled, but in a desperate move, France threw everything into a counterattack. They even used 600 Parisian taxicabs to ferry soldiers to the front lines. At the Battle of the Marne, the German advance was finally halted. The Schlieffen Plan, and the hope for a quick war, was dead. Both armies now tried to outflank each other, racing toward the English Channel. But everywhere they met, they stopped and dug. By the end of 1914, a continuous line of trenches stretched from the Swiss border to the North Sea. Over 450 miles of earth turned into a scar across Europe. The war of movement was over. The war of attrition had begun. The boys who left home in August thought they'd be back by Christmas. Instead, they were trapped in a hell of their own making. By December 1914, the home by Christmas promise had become a bitter joke. The grand maneuvers of August were gone, replaced by a static, 450-mile scar of earth. Across Europe, families sat at dinner tables with empty chairs, realized the glory they'd cheered for in the summer was actually a meat grinder that was just getting started. The tragedy of 1914 was that 19th century tactics were meeting 20th century technology. Generals were still ordering cavalry charges with swords drawn, only to meet the 600 rounds per minute fury of the Maxim machine gun. On a single day in August, the French army lost 27,000 men. That is, one death every 3 seconds. The age of the heroic charge was officially dead. As the weather turned, the race to the sea ended in a draw. With nowhere left to go, both sides did the only thing they could to survive. They dug. What started as temporary foxholes evolved into a sophisticated, interconnected nightmare of zigzagging trenches, barbed wire, and no man's land. This wasn't a battlefield anymore. It was a siege on a continental scale. But even in this new hell, a ghost of the old world remained. On Christmas Eve, 1914, the guns fell silent in some sectors. German and British soldiers sang carols across the mud, exchanged cigarettes, and even played football. It was a brief, beautiful moment of humanity, and the last time it would ever happen. The high commands on both sides were horrified and made sure it would never be repeated. 1914 was supposed to be the war to end all wars. Instead, it was just the prologue. The lines were drawn, the trenches were deep, and the world was about to enter a 3-year stalemate of industrial-scale slaughter. In Part 2, we'll step into the mud of 1915 and 1916, the years of Verdun, the Somme, and the birth of modern horror. Thank you for revisiting history.